welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen, and enjoy my stories every day. In the quiet cul-de-sac where we lived, our home was known for its grand library, a sanctuary lined with shelves brimming with literature from floor to ceiling. It was my pride, a diverse collection accumulated over years, but more recently, it had become the focal point of an unusual interest by our neighbor, Greg. Lately, Greg's visits had become more frequent. He was always a book lover, but his behavior had taken on a peculiar pattern. He'd been stuck on the same book for weeks, an old copy of Symbolic Meanings, The Hidden Languages. At first, I thought it was his thirst for knowledge about cryptology or perhaps an eccentric fascination with secret codes. But that was until I decided to look into this book myself. One evening, as I perused the library shelves, my curiosity piqued, and I pulled the dusty tome from its place. It felt heavier than I remembered. Opening it, I found the margins littered with odd symbols, letters randomly highlighted and others violently scratched out. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I realized these weren't mere notes or scholarly annotations. It was a conversation, coded, secretive, personal. Putting the book back, an unsettling silence enveloped me. That night, after dinner, I noticed my wife, Melissa, excuse herself unusually early under the pretext of needing some quiet time to read. The dots started to connect in my disturbed mind. Creeping silently, I approached the library door, which was slightly ajar. There, in the soft glow of the lamp, sat Melissa. Her posture was relaxed, an image of tranquility that I had grown to adore over the years. But now, it only fueled my rising dread. In her hands was the very book, and in her other, a pencil, her fingers gracefully marking yet another page. My heart sank as I stood frozen, watching the love of my life engage in what was clearly a secret dialogue with Greg. The realization was a brutal slash to my soul. They had transformed my sanctuary of books into a den of clandestine exchanges. Feeling a cocktail of betrayal and fury building within me, I stepped back into the shadows, unseen. My mind raced with the magnitude of the deceit. It was in that shadowed hallway, heart pounding and mind reeling, that I decided it was not just the book that would close tonight but also the chapter of my life with Melissa. Revenge began to seep into my thoughts, dark and intoxicating. If my wife and neighbor found solace in secrets, I would ensure those very secrets would undo them. As I retreated to our bedroom, the plan began to take shape. My revenge would be meticulous and chilling, divorce would only be the beginning of her unraveling. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the house around me felt cavernously empty, echoing with the silent screams of my fractured trust. Tonight, I had discovered the truth hidden in plain sight, and life as I knew it would never be the same again. The next morning dawned gray and unremarkable, a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. I rose early, unrest, my decision from the night before cementing into a cold resolve. Today, I would confront Melissa and Greg. As I dressed, my mind replayed the countless evenings she'd slipped away to the library, the gentle clicks of the door, the hushed silences upon my approach. Every moment now seemed a fragment of a larger deceit. By the time Melissa awoke, I was already seated at the kitchen table, the book laid out before me like an accusation. She entered, her smile bright and unsuspecting, which only knotted my gut further. "Good morning," she chirped, reaching for the coffee pot. Her normalcy in the face of betrayal stung sharply. "Melissa, we need to talk." My voice was calm, almost detached. She turned, her expression flickering from surprise to concern. "What's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowing as she noticed the book between us. "This," I said, tapping the cover of the book. "I know about you and Greg." Her face blanched, the mug she held clattering slightly as she set it down. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but her eyes darted nervously towards the book. "Don't lie to me, Melissa. I've seen the notes, the codes. You've been communicating with him through this book." Why? The silence that followed was heavy, charged with the weight of impending truths. Finally, she sank into a chair, her posture deflating. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "It started out innocently, just a shared interest in cryptography. But it evolved." Evolved into what, Melissa? Betrayal? My voice rose, a mix of pain and anger. "How could you do this to us?" "It was never meant to hurt you," she replied softly, tears brimming in her eyes. "It was foolish, a game that went too far. I never meant for it to become this." "A game?" I scoffed. "Our marriage isn't a game. And where does Greg fit into all this now? Was he just a convenient partner in your game?" Before she could respond, the doorbell rang. Startled, we both looked towards the front door. I stood, my anger a live wire, and walked to the door. Pulling it open, I found Greg on the doorstep, his expression one of confused concern. "Is everything okay? I saw your car still in the drive." He began, but stopped short when he saw the storm behind my eyes. "Come in, Greg. We were just discussing you." My tone was icy as I stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. Greg walked in, his eyes shifting between Melissa and me. "What's going on?" "You tell me," I challenged, throwing the book on the table in front of him. "Care to explain your part in this?" Greg glanced at the book, then at Melissa, his face registering the betrayal. "Look, I didn't realize." "You didn't realize what?" "That she was married. That you were helping her cheat." I was nearly shouting now, my voice echoing off the walls. "No, it wasn't like that," Greg protested, his voice raising in defense. "It started as a shared interest, but yes, it went too far. I'm sorry." The room spun with admissions and apologies, a maelstrom of betrayal and remorse. As they spoke, the pieces of my broken trust lay scattered around me, each word from them a hammer driving the fissures deeper. "I need both of you to leave," I said finally, my voice breaking with the strain of contained emotions. "I need to think, to figure out where to go from here." Melissa rose, tears streaming down her face, while Greg nodded solemnly, both of them aware of the damage their innocent game had caused. As they left, the silence settled back around me, a stark reminder of the solitude I now faced. Sitting back down, I stared at the book, the catalyst of my unraveling life. Revenge had seemed a straightforward path last night, but now, mired in the complexity of their confessions, I found myself questioning what justice would truly look like. This was only the beginning, and the road ahead promised to be fraught with choices I never wanted to make. The emptiness of the house echoed my hollowed heart as I paced the living room floor, each step a beat in the symphony of betrayal that played over in my mind. The quiet was suffocating, a stark contrast to the chaos of emotions that raged within me. I knew I couldn't let this lie. Action was necessary, but first, I needed more information. My plan began to form, meticulous and calculating. The following morning, I made my way to Greg's house under the guise of a casual visit. My knuckles rapped sharply against his door, the sound a staccato in the still morning air. Greg answered, his face showing surprise and a hint of wariness. "Hey, I thought we should talk, maybe clear the air," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Sure, come in," Greg replied, stepping aside to allow me entry. As I walked into his living room, my eyes quickly scanned the surroundings, looking for anything that might provide further insight into his relationship with Melissa. I needed leverage, anything that could be used in my plan for retribution. "So, what did you want to talk about?" Greg asked, his voice tentative. "About what happened with Melissa," I started, watching his reaction closely. "I just want to understand why." "Why her? Why like this?" Greg sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It wasn't planned. It just happened." We shared a lot of interests, and it went from there. I'm really sorry, man. I nodded, feigning understanding. And the book? How did that start? It was her idea, he confessed. She thought it would be exciting to communicate through something no one else could decipher. I guess it was thrilling, secretive. His admission sparked an idea. Show me, I said abruptly. Show you what? The book. Show me how you did it, the codes. Greg hesitated but eventually led me to his study, where another copy of the same book lay on his desk. He opened it and began to explain the system they had developed: symbols for meeting times, highlighted letters spelling out messages. As he demonstrated, I memorized every detail, my mind racing with possibilities. Thanks for showing me this, Greg. It does clear things up a bit, I said, my tone light, hiding the cold fury that tightened my chest. As I left his house, my mind was already turning over the details of my plan. I had seen emails open on his computer, personal documents lying around, enough to start putting pressure where it would hurt. But first, I needed to secure my own position. The next step was a visit to a lawyer to discuss the possibilities for divorce and legal retribution. The lawyer, Ms. Turner, was a stern woman with a reputation for being a shark in court. After hearing everything, you have a few options, Ms. Turner explained. We can go after him for alienation of affection, and possibly more, depending on what else we find. As for your wife, the divorce can cite infidelity, which could affect the settlement. Proceed with it all, I stated firmly. I want to make sure they both feel the consequences of their actions. Very well. I'll need all the evidence you can provide, the book, any communications, everything. As I left her office, a plan forming in my mind felt almost like a strategic battle, each move calculated with precision. The betrayal had shattered something within me, but now, retribution was my driving force. This was no longer just about a broken heart, it was about setting the scales right, ensuring that the deceit didn't go unpunished. The game had changed, and I was now holding the winning cards. The next moves would be critical, and I was ready to play them to the fullest. The wheels of justice and revenge turned slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. Over the weeks that followed, I orchestrated a meticulous plan that would leave no stone unturned, no secret hidden. Greg and Melissa's clandestine affair would unravel in the most public and devastating way possible. First, I took the evidence to Ms. Turner, who prepared the legal documents with precision. As the divorce proceedings began, I made sure that the details of Melissa's infidelity were laid bare for all to see, ensuring the community knew of their deceit. It was just the beginning of their social ostracism. Meanwhile, I used Greg's own tools against him. The codes and symbols they used for their secret communications were turned into a trap. I created fake entries, subtly laying them around for Greg to find, entries that hinted at Melissa's doubts and regrets about him, stoking the fires of mistrust between them. Then, I reached out to Greg under the pretense of wanting to settle things amicably. We agreed to meet at a local bar, a neutral ground swarming with mutual acquaintances, a perfect stage for the final act of my revenge. Greg, I thought about everything, and maybe it's best if we just put it all behind us, I said, my voice calm but laced with an undercurrent of malice that only I could discern. He looked relieved, almost grateful. I'm glad to hear that. I really am sorry about everything. As you should be, I replied, my tone sharpening. But tell me, Greg, did you ever wonder if Melissa was truly committed to you? Or were you just a diversion from her boredom? Greg's face faltered, confusion and suspicion flashing in his eyes. What do you mean? Just something to think about, I shrugged nonchalantly, watching as the seed of doubt took root. As our meeting ended, I left him stewing in his paranoia, returning home to find Melissa packing her things in what was once our shared bedroom. Her presence was a stark reminder of all that had been lost. Are you satisfied? Melissa asked coldly, her voice echoing with bitterness. "More than you know," I responded, my voice devoid of any warmth. "And just so we're clear, your relationship with Greg, it won't last. He's already doubting you, wondering whether you used him just like you did me." Her eyes widened, hurt and betrayal mingling with the guilt that already haunted her. "You're cruel," she whispered. "Cruelty is only a reflection of the actions inflicted upon me," I replied. The doorbell rang, and upon answering, I was greeted by several of our mutual friends, faces grim with disapproval. Word had spread, and the community's judgment was swift. Melissa walked past me, her head held low, avoiding the stares of those she had once called friends. Later, Greg called, his voice frantic. "She's gone. She left and said it was all a mistake, that she was misled by everyone, including me." "Seems like you both got what you deserved," I said coldly before hanging up. In the end, my revenge was complete, not just in the dismantling of their affair but in ensuring they could never trust anyone, or each other, again. The house, once filled with the laughter and warmth of love, now stood as a monument to retribution. As I watched the sunset from the window of my now solitary home, I realized that while I had won this bitter game, the victory was hollow. The quiet that settled was filled with the echoes of a love lost and a vengeance fulfilled. Melissa and Greg, now shadows of their former selves, had vanished from my life, and in their absence, I contemplated the cost of such ruthless revenge. In seeking justice, I had lost parts of myself that would never be reclaimed.